Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we are going to share Chupacabra encounter horror stories. First story. I killed a Chupacabra. I was looking forward to some time away from work. I lived just outside of El Paso, Texas, and was doing okay for myself. I had a steady job as a waiter at a nice restaurant just on the outskirts of the city, and sometimes I do music gigs with my band. Eliza, the vocalist, and I were an item, and I thought we made one hell of a duo on stage. We even had a few fans that I wasn't unhappy. Far from it, but I wanted a short break. Just a bit of time to recharge my batteries and go back to something familiar, something safe. Eliza kissed me on the lips as I left that morning, a bag packed. Drive safe, she told me. I would have been happy for her to come with me, but she couldn't get the time off work. Besides, I don't know how comfortable she really would have been going down to see Pepito John with me. My parents died when I was young, so Pepito Juan raised me. He was a stubborn old man living on his farm down in Mexico, but I was happy with him. Since I'd immigrated to the U.S., we hadn't stayed in touch as much as I wanted. He had no computer or email. All he had were his letters and the occasional phone call. I cherished those, but they didn't diminish the worries in the back of my mind. He was old, and even when I left, it showed. I could hear it in his voice when he spoke to me. Going home to him was just as much about checking to make sure that stubborn old man was still getting by as it was about taking a break. When my car pulled up to his old ranch, he was out front, sitting on his porch and waiting for me. Javier, my boy. He rose slowly to his feet, approaching me to pull me into a hug. His skin was like tanned leather and rough to the touch, but his eyes held the same sparkle I'd known all my life. Not even time had taken that from him. We had dinner together. I told him about Eliza, about how my music was coming along, and about my job. Seeing the way he smiled as I talked, I knew he was proud of me. "How have you been?" I finally asked him. His smile faltered. "As well as I can be. My body gets sorer and sorer every day, and this year's harvest wasn't so good. But I suppose that's the way it goes. Next year's will be better. If you need help, I could stay and dash." No. Don't. Stay up north. You're making something of your life, Javier. It's more than I did. He smiled sadly. This ranch. It's nice. I'm happy. But if I'd had your opportunities, I'd have taken them. You got a chance at a better life than I ever had. This land is just land. This ranch, just a building. This is my life, not yours. He reached out a hand to rest on mine. I'm happy here the way I am. I'll get by. What means the most to me right now is what means the most to any parent. I want to see you thrive, and you're doing that now. I'll tell you what I told your father. Don't give it up for the ranch. I've been here for 50 years now. I know that it's not worth it. Not really. He patted my hand. You know, you'd be proud of the man you're becoming. They both would be. He knew how much it meant to me to hear that, and I knew that he meant it. With that said, he got up to find a deck of cards. We played just like we had when I was a boy until the sun went down and it was time for bed. I woke up to the sound of screaming. Scrambling out of bed, I peered out the window into the darkness of Pepito Juan's land. I could see movement in the shadows and the faint outline of his old barn in the darkness. I'd seen this all before. Coyotes looking for livestock. Almost on instinct, I was out the door. I heard Pepito Juan fumbling around to get ready, but his old bones weren't as fast as I was. I knew where he kept the gun, and I'd done this before. "I've got it," I called, and I just barely heard him call out for me to wait before I was outside with the rifle. In the porch light, I could see one of the pigs rush out of the barn. I heard the scream of a goat and broke into a run. The barn door was open, and in the dim light, I could see the shape of some sort of animal and hear the gnashing of teeth. I saw the reflection of the light from the porch in the eyes of a dead goat, and above it, red eyes so fierce that they made me freeze. The creature hissed at me. Hissed, not growled. I'd seen coyotes before. This wasn't a coyote. My next thought was a mountain lion. I knew they lived in the area, but I'd never seen one. The creature reared up, still staring at me, unblinking as I raised a rifle and opened fire. The first shot staggered it. It howled in pain, and I shot again and again, watching the creature try and retreat further into the darkness. But the barn had no other exit. I was between it and escape. I think I shot it about 4 or 5 times before it collapsed, breathing heavily before letting out a pitiful whimper and dying. Behind me, I could hear Pepito one approaching and saw the light of his flashlight. "Mountain lion, I think," I said breathlessly. I kept the gun trained on it. As Pepito one drew closer. As he did, I saw what I'd killed. It wasn't a mountain lion. The creature had coarse brown fur and a twisted face that looked more like a snake's than a cat's. Its fangs were massive and protruded from its jaw. Along its legs and belly, I spotted scaly skin, and it had bird-like talons on its front legs. Its eyes were blood red and seemed alive even in death. A bloody hole in its neck was my only reassurance that it wouldn't be getting back up. It wasn't as big as I'd been expecting. A little smaller than a mountain lion, but that hadn't made much of a difference to the goat it had torn apart. It had killed the animal with a vicious bite to the neck and had gone after the organs next. It had been in the middle of feasting on those when I'd interrupted it. "What the hell is that?" I asked. I nudged the creature with the barrel of the gun. "That's what's been killing my animals for the past week." Pepito one said bitterly, "Chupacabra." I looked at him, a little confused. I'd heard the name before. It was a made-up cryptid that decorated merch at tourist traps. As a child, I believed in them. But I knew better now. A chupacabra? Seriously? You've got to be joking. That's just a story. Does that look like a story to you, boy? Pepito one replied, and crouched down beside the dead beast. It's small. Maybe a juvenile. The one I saw a few weeks ago looked bigger. He sounded concerned, and then looked back up at me. "Did you see anything else? Was there another one?" "No, I didn't. Just this one." I looked down at that creature, the chupacabra. I could barely believe my eyes. "Might just be my eyes are mistaken," Pepito one said softly. "Go get the gas and so we can burn this. I'll round up the animals." I did what he said, and I watched as he dragged the chupacabra out of the barn to burn the body. As it burned, Pepito one rolled himself a cigarette and lit it. He stared at the carcass of the creature and its victim, stoic and silent. "How many of these things have you seen?" I finally asked. I'd lived with him almost my whole life, and I'd never once seen anything like that. "A few," he replied. "They first came to my father's ranch when I was a boy. They're hunters by nature, insatiable appetites, tough to kill, and vengeful. Not sure if they feel like we do or not, but their kind can smell each other from far off. If they smell a dead one, they'll come to investigate. I don't know if he has any friends, but I don't want to find out. They're rare these days. I figured most of them died out years ago, hunted to the brink of extinction by angry ranchers. They're rare these days. Most who claim to see one are liars." He took a drag of his cigarette. "They usually stay down south. Never expected I'd see one so close to the border. Hopefully this one's just a straggler." Staring into the flames, I looked back over at Pepito one. "Has it been here long?" I asked. "Not sure. Heard about some killings down the road, but that could have been coyotes too. There were a few here earlier this week, before you came. I shot at it a few nights ago, and was hoping I'd scared it off." "Well, I guess it's got the message now," I murmured. Pepito one chuckled. "Yes, I suppose it does. But I try not to dwell on that night. I try to focus on my chores and help as much as I could. After all, whatever that thing was, it was dead now. We didn't talk about the chupacabra the next day, and the night that followed, I slept soundly. I thought about telling Eliza about what I'd seen, but I didn't know if she'd have believed me. I wasn't even sure I believed it. It was a couple of days into my stay when I went into town that afternoon to pick up supplies. Pepito One had intended to go, and I made him stay in his spot at the kitchen table. You rest up, you work hard enough as it is. I told him, I'll make the trip. Don't spoil me too much, boy. This old man has to stretch his weary bones every so often, and he can stretch them when I'm not around. I replied. He huffed in approval and seemed to accept that I was going whether he liked it or not. Well then, if you're offering, stubborn as he was, Pepito One seemed happy that I was willing to save him the trip. He handed over the keys to his truck and helped me make a grocery list. There was a small store in town, a few miles down the road. I recognized some of the people inside and lost a bit of time catching up with them and making small talk. The old community hadn't forgotten me, even though I'd left. I was appreciative of that. The drive back to Pepito One's ranch was relaxing. I hummed along to the radio, and as I pulled up to the house, I felt content. Stepping out under the sun, I brought the groceries inside and called out to announce I was home. Hey, old man. No answer. Pepito One, he wasn't in the kitchen or in his bedroom. My next stop was out back to check the barn. I found him lying in the dirt between the house and the barn. He was on his side, and from a distance, I didn't see the damage. I didn't see how he'd been torn open and ripped apart. Even now, I wish I'd never seen it. I'd seen my fair share of gore and death. Pepito One had made me slaughter animals for meat in my childhood. He taught me how to gut and skin, but it's different when you see someone you love cut open like that. The scream of anguish that came out of my throat was deafening as the tears streamed down my cheeks. Flies crawled across Pepito One's open eyes, looking for a place to lay their eggs. I shooed them away as I cradled his body and finally had to pull myself away to call the police. They chalked it up to an animal attack. He'd been complaining about similar livestock attacks, and the predator had probably seen an opportunity to ambush him at that time. No one talked about how there was no blood in his veins or near his body. The local authorities shot a couple of coyotes who'd been in the area, and the small town blamed the killings on them. It was the most logical answer, after all. I buried Pepito One beside my parents in a nearby cemetery. Later, I told the lawyers to sell his ranch. It was my property now, to do with as I pleased, and I knew that Pepito One wouldn't have wanted me to stay tied to it. He'd wanted me to continue living my own life, and I thought it was a better way to honor him than holding onto a piece of land I didn't want or need. When all was said and done, I went back to El Paso early, driving home in a haze and into the arms of Eliza. On my first night back, she held me as I cried and let out all of my grief. It hung over me like a cloud, but I still tried to go on like I was supposed to. But the world felt like a darker place. I'd lost my father, and in him I'd lost my home. I wasn't sure if going back to work would be a good idea, but I ended up being thankful for it. It took my mind off of Pepito One. Just the return to some sort of familiar routine felt nice. The restaurant was a little more upscale than a standard bar and grill, but not by much. I'd taken Eliza here once or twice myself, and the food was good. The managers treated me well, and most of the staff was nice to be around, save for one of the line cooks. His name was Rob, and I'd known from my first week when I caught a glimpse of the swastika tattoo on his arm that he and I would never get along. Sure enough, Rob hated me, simply because I'd been born a few hours south of where I worked. But he at least knew enough not to say anything about it. Management tolerated him, but only as long as he did his job. The dining room had a nice panoramic window overlooking the highway outside. There wasn't much of a view, but I didn't mind that. Some nights we had live music. Some nights I'd even performed. By the bar were a couple of TVs. They either played sports or the news. Never anything else. When I wasn't too busy before the dinner rush, sometimes I'd watch them briefly. My first day back wasn't a particularly busy day. It was mid-afternoon, and I had only a couple of tables to tend to. They were taken care of, so I passed the time by watching the news. Though the TVs were muted, I could still piece together the story. There'd been a murder. A street musician I'd seen in downtown El Paso a few times. He'd been good, a guitarist like me. And with the pain of losing Pepito once still fresh in my heart, I found myself mourning him too as I went through my day. I didn't look into the murder until I got home and thought to Google it. Morbid curiosity made me want to know just what had happened to the guy, and there was a small hope that whoever had killed him had been caught. What I found turned my blood cold. The guitarist had been found at a bus station that morning. There weren't many details other than he'd been mauled, and the police suspected it was a body dump since there was no blood found at the scene. That was all I needed. I tried to dismiss my fears, but as I lay awake that night beside Eliza, I couldn't help but wonder, what if something followed me back from Mexico? The Chupacabra was dead. I'd killed it myself, but Pepito one had said it had looked small. He called it a juvenile. He said he'd seen a bigger one. The second death, barely a day later, didn't ease my concerns. The victim was a motorist who'd been stopped on the side of the highway this time. No one I knew. I don't know if that made it easier or harder. The details had been the same. A mutilated body with no blood. This one was called an animal attack too. I guess that wasn't wrong. They just didn't really know what kind of animal had attacked them. Pepito one had told me that the Chupacabra were vengeful. I wonder what he meant by that. He'd told me that what mattered the most to any parent was to see their child thrive. And he'd called the Chupacabra a juvenile. He said he'd seen a bigger one that I knew what was coming, and I knew it wouldn't take it long to find me. They were hunters after all. That's what they do. I thought about asking for more time off, but it didn't seem to make sense. Part of me didn't want to believe the danger I was in. I didn't want to believe that something was coming for me. Even if I could have asked, what would I have said? Explaining that I wanted more time off to hide from a Chupacabra would have sounded insane. The management trusted me, but not enough to believe something like that. After the second attack, I figured I'd try some more practical measures. I bought a gun, a small pistol I could easily hide. I figured I'd kill one of these things. I could probably kill another. While I worked, I kept it in my locker. I kept it in my hand as I walked to the car after work and in my pocket whenever I left the house. It made me feel safer, even as I heard stories of other animal attacks. They got little attention in news. The police killed a mountain lion and hoped it would change things. It didn't. The attacks were close now, all near my apartment or the restaurant. It was close, it just hadn't found me yet. I thought about going out and looking for it, ending this all, but I didn't. Maybe I'm a coward, but I didn't want to give myself up to that monster. I wanted it to come to me on my own terms. Eventually, I got what I wanted. The management had a policy in place. They'd rotate shifts on who had to close the restaurant. Usually I closed with a line cook named Terry, but Terry had been out sick that night. Rob was the one working in his place. As we closed that night, we didn't talk. He cleaned the kitchen, I cleaned out the front, and took the trash out to the door of the kitchen so he could collect it. He shot me a dirty look as I left it there for him. "Don't make me clean up your trash," he said coldly. "Go take it out yourself. I gotta clean the bathrooms. I'll take that out." I told him, "You're going out there anyways." Rob scoffed hatefully, but he didn't argue. I watched him grab the garbage bag I'd taken for him and drag it to the back door of the kitchen, where he stepped outside. He was still gone by the time I'd finished with the bathrooms. That was a little odd. His cleanup was only half done. A mop bucket full of dirty water sat in the kitchen unattended. I hefted the garbage bag from the bathrooms behind me as I tentatively stepped into the kitchen. Rob was nowhere to be found. It occurred to me that maybe he was having a smoke. I wondered if it would be better to leave the trash bag by the door for him or go out and throw it into the dumpster myself. He'd probably have seen the former as a gesture of disrespect and the latter as an interruption. Either way, he'd probably get angry. I figured I might as well just take it out to the dumpster myself. He'd be less angry that way. Opening the door and stepping out into the cool night air, I immediately froze as I saw a familiar set of blood-red eyes. In an instant, I was back on Pepito Juan's ranch in the barn. The beast stood over its kill. Rob still had a look of horror on his face, but I already knew he was dead. I doubt he even knew what had hit him. This Chupacabra was bigger than the other one. It stood almost as large as the dumpster itself, big and bear-like. Its hiss made my bones quiver, and it crept over Rob's corpse to advance on me. Looking into those eyes, I knew that it recognized me. It knew who I was, and it knew what I'd done. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of massive fangs. I could see its rear legs tensing to pounce, and I ran. I forced the door behind me closed as I heard the Chupacabra slam against it. I locked it before scrambling towards the personal lockers to find my gun. I could hear the creature slamming against the door, demanding entry as I fumbled the lock. I only barely got it off and had opened the locker when I heard the door behind me break. The hiss of the Chupacabra filled the restaurant. I felt the grip of my pistol in my hand, and I immediately got low to the ground. The Chupacabra crept through the kitchen, its heavy footsteps betraying its position. It sniffed the air and hissed in anger. Those footsteps made their way towards the lockers. But it wasn't there yet. I broke into a run, hearing it snarl as I bolted past it and through the kitchen. It was too big to move freely in there. It was too slow to catch me. I got through the door to the dining room and ducked under a table to hide. I clutched the gun close and watched the kitchen door carefully. The Chupacabra squeezed through it with little effort mere moments after I'd hidden. Its teeth were bared and it snarled angrily. It raised its head, sniffing the air to catch my scent. It began looking for me. It knew I was here. Even if I got out, it would follow me. It would kill me. That was why it had come after all. It swept one of its front talons upwards, knocking over one of the tables near the kitchen. Its head darted around for any sign of movement and found none. With shaking hands, I steadied the gun and took aim at it as it raised its body up onto another table, using it as a perch to elevate itself and keep sniffing. The wooden table buckled under its weight. I fired. The Chupacabra barely reacted, but I couldn't imagine I missed. Its eyes immediately fixed on me, and its mouth curled back in a hellish snarl defined by rage and hate. Stumbling out of my hiding spot, I fired again blindly. The Chupacabra bolted towards me, and I only barely got out of the way in time. I caught myself hurling unlit candles and drink menus off the tables at it. They did nothing. I couldn't stop to line up a shot, and I didn't want to waste my bullets. I skidded to safety behind the bar, and the Chupacabra slammed against it. The wooden fixture shook. I heard glasses fall and break around me. Its blood-red eyes appeared over the counter of the bar, glaring at me. I could smell the rot on its breath as it opened its horrible maw and feel the tears on my cheeks as I cried in fear of death. Hopelessly, I fired at it, and I saw it jerk back abruptly. The cry it made was either one of rage or pain. I hoped it was pain. The creature seemed to recoil, batting at its face, and I took the opportunity to jump the counter and try to put some distance between myself and the monster. One remaining blood red, I watched me. It hissed in rage and barreled after me again. It knocked tables and chairs out of its way, shattering them with a single swipe of its powerful arms. I couldn't outrun it. There wasn't a chance in hell of that. Ahead of me, I saw the panoramic window. I could see cars on the highway, but it might as well have just been another wall. I'd bounce off the glass uselessly if I tried to jump through, and so powered by adrenaline, I turned sharply. Maybe, just maybe I could reach the door. Maybe I could reach my car. Maybe I could escape. The Chupacabra did the same, but there was something neither I nor it had thought about. It was bigger and faster, but it wasn't as agile. Its talons scratched the floor as it tried to turn with me. Its massive body skidded a little, slamming against the window. I heard it huff in rage and saw it getting ready to pounce again. In that moment, I saw my chance. I raised the gun and I fired. The Chupacabra jerked backwards. The window shattered, and it raised its taloned front legs to shield its face. All it took was one misstep of its back leg, and it lost its footing entirely. The Chupacabra fell gracelessly out the window and into the highway. I heard the screech of tires and saw a pickup truck hit head-on. The Chupacabra was thrown out of sight. I saw it roll along the ground and out of sight like a rag doll. The truck veered off the road. I could see the outline of the driver in the cab. He didn't seem hurt, but I wasn't sure. For a moment, I stood stock still, gun in my hands and my body trembling violently. My eyes darted in the direction the Chupacabra had been thrown. I saw no sign of it. Had it run off? How badly was it hurt? I wondered if the impact had been enough to kill it, or at least wound it. There wasn't any sign of a body. Just empty scrubland and highway as far as the eye could see. The truck's driver was shaken, but safe. His grill had taken a serious dent, but that was the worst of it. He called the police for me, and they showed up soon afterwards. I kept my story vague. I just said it was an animal attack. What they pieced together was that a bear killed Rob. It was looking for food in the dumpsters, and he disturbed it. Then it attacked me, fell out the window, got hit by that truck, and ran off. I didn't say anything different. No one would believe I was attacked by a Chupacabra. Why try and convince them? I quit my job the next day. The restaurant would be closed for repairs, and I'd seen what was after me, face to face. That night, I told Eliza everything. She didn't believe me at first, but I know what I saw. I killed one of those creatures at Pepito Juan's ranch, and I was attacked by another one at the restaurant. It tracked my scent and followed me home. It was going to keep following me. I don't live near El Paso anymore. I don't live anywhere these days. Eliza and I are headed north. We sleep in motels, and we're hoping we'll find somewhere to settle down soon. We can start again there. Maybe start up another band and rebuild our lives. I don't know how far we need to go. I'm hoping I'll figure it out soon, though. I just know that we haven't gone far enough yet. 2 days ago, we stayed in a little motel just off the highway outside Denver. A couple of hours ago, I heard on the radio that the owner was found dead. He'd been drained of blood. He isn't the first. Someone dies in every town we visit. I've made my peace with that. I know that I'm to blame. Eliza tells me I'm not, but it's me that it wants. I killed its offspring, and it wants to return the favor. The Chupacabra is coming for me, and I don't know how much farther I can run. Second story. I just came home tonight, and this happened. So, I had just gotten done hanging out with a few friends, and I had to head home. I made the drive home safely and pulled into my driveway. The lights outside of my house were on, but the lights inside were not. This isn't unusual, as I normally come home late. However, the curtains that showed into my front room were open when they were normally closed. I found this a bit odd and decided to go check it out. I walked over to the patch of windows that I could see into, but the light was very faint. I peered inside the window, and I saw what looked like a huge animal sniffing around my kitchen table. It wasn't a dog, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a lion. I've never seen anything like it before. I didn't know what it was, and I freaked out. I called my mom, but she was asleep, so she didn't answer her phone. I unlocked the door and slowly walked inside the house. I had the intention of getting a closer look at what it was, then getting out. However, I got to the room where it was supposed to be, and it was gone. There was a pile of dirt in the middle of the room, but nothing else. No footprints, no broken windows, nothing to show the entrance of anything. Even my basement door was locked. I did a complete scan of the entire house, and I found that my mom and little brother were asleep. I went into my room, and before I was able to turn the light switch on, I saw the shadow of the animal again, sitting in the middle of my room. I flipped the lights on immediately, and just like the other room, no animal, just a pile of dirt where it was sitting. This is the first time anything like this has happened to me, and I'm kind of freaking out about it. I figured this would be the board that would want to hear something like this, so I'd be interested to hear your input on this. Thanks. Third story. Something weird is going on in the apartment above us. So me and my boyfriend moved into our first apartment together in the beginning of May. Of course, we were super excited as this was our first place together away from family. We were on our way to becoming real adults. After moving in all of our crap and settling, and we quickly discovered all the pros and cons of having an apartment in the city. We got used to the police sirens and traffic noise pretty quickly, but we noticed that the upstairs neighbors were making quite a lot of noise. And not just regular loud stomping or music noise, but a very strange sound that was almost the exact same every time. When we first moved in, the noise would only occur every few days, if that. However, when it started, it seemed to happen again and again until late at night. The only way I can describe the sound is almost like furniture being dragged across the floor in the same twice pattern. BRRT, BRRT. The second drag is always shorter and louder than the first and always comes a couple seconds after the first. The force is strong enough that it shakes our apartment. I've had to reposition things on our bookshelf and counters because they get shaken out of place. We dealt with this noise for about 2 weeks before we decided to say anything. At this point, the noise had been happening for about 3 days straight, and we were getting pretty tired of it. My boyfriend was at work at the time, so I decided to go up myself to see what was going on. I knocked on the door, and a woman, probably in her mid-30s, answered the door. She looked like a normal woman, black hair, fair skin, thicker build, but it's her eyes that put me off. They were so sunken and it almost looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. I almost felt bad about coming up there to talk to her, but I decided to ask anyway. Me, hi, how are you? We moved in a couple of weeks ago into the apartment below you, and we noticed some noise coming from your apartment. Woman, what? Me, yeah, it kind of sounds like furniture being dragged across the ground. I just wanted to see if you knew anything about it. Woman, no, that's the construction going on in the penthouse. Me. Oh, okay. I just wasn't sure since it goes on till almost midnight. Woman, it's not us. I have to go. Bye. And then she shut the door in my face. Her facial was blank the entire time, and she had this kind of hunched posture. It freaked me out. When my boyfriend got home, he asked what happened. I wish I had told him everything, but all I said was that the woman told me it was construction in the penthouse, which is 3 floors above us. We thought nothing of it for a while and just kind of dealt with the noise, thinking it was the construction workers just doing their jobs. That is until we actually went up there. One night we were drinking with some friends, and we figured that it would be fun to go see the penthouse floor for ourselves. It's 3 a.m., and we all ride the elevator up to the top of the building where the penthouse is, and when the elevator doors opened, I felt my stomach sink a little bit. The floor only extended to the left of the building and not the right where our apartment is. There is no penthouse above us. Never was. And that's not it. According to my boyfriend, he has spoken with some of the residents that live directly under the penthouse, and they claim that they hear nothing when the construction crew is working. So we know that the woman in the apartment above us was blatantly lying, probably to just get us to go away. We wanted to go back up there to say something, but we never got around to it. We kind of ignored it until about a week ago when we heard what sounded like hammers tapping on the floor at about 9 a.m. on a Saturday. My boyfriend, obviously angry, went down to the leasing office to complain about it, and that's when the bombshell hit. Apparently, they had just started renovations that day on that apartment, which is why there was the hammer noise, but when he mentioned the dragging sound, they seemed confused and then told us that no one has lived in that apartment for months. I have no idea who or what I talked to, but I'm afraid to go back up there. So far, the noise has lessened, but every time I hear it, it sends chills down my spine. Fourth story. I ran over a Chupacabra. This happened back in 2009 near Dallas, Texas. I was driving with 2 other friends in the car around 3 a.m. No drugs or alcohol in anyone's system. I was driving on the highway, and we spot 2 creatures moving toward the road very fast. One leaps the divider beam that was at least 5 feet tall like a person would. The other one stopped before the wall that I could only see because we were going downhill. The one that leaped the wall kept going, and it was too late for me to avoid it. My front bumper hit first, then it rolled under my car, and I felt the back tire go over it. I continued driving because we were freaking out trying to figure out what it was. We got about 3 miles and decided to turn around and figure out what I hit. When we made it back, nothing was there. The next day, I inspected my car. The bumper was shattered, and there was patches of long, stringy hair under my car. We all aged. It looked like a mostly hairless bear with patches of hair. It moved kind of like a bear or ape would. After hours of research, I couldn't find anything it could have been. Fifth story, Gods in the Mountain. I've been chasing ghost stories since I was a kid. I like to examine them from a historical angle rather than simply speculate, researching the history of the haunting and the history of the site or the person/family, and then trying to unravel the story behind the haunting. Sometimes this reveals a hoax. In fact, I have more hoax stories than I do genuine ghost stories. Sometimes it reveals a hidden truth lurking in the bones and roots of a property, or in the heart of the person who seems most affected by the haunting. I'll share a bunch of my experiences and my stories here, but not this time. This time I want to tell you about the most amazing of my stories, and it has nothing to do with ghosts. This is the story of my first encounter with extraterrestrial life, and the event that convinced me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that alien life not only exists, but is visiting this planet of ours. I have no idea why. I just know that it is. I was 26 and traveling in Peru, staying with a Peruvian family and teaching locals English. I was staying with a cool guy called Naz, who was actually the son of the family whose home I was living in. Naz was, and still is, a keen mountaineer and liked nothing better than to head out in his rusty pickup, drive into the mountains, and spend a few days climbing, trekking, and generally exploring. I'd never climbed, but Naz's love for the sport was infectious, and as I loved to camp and to travel and explore, I agreed one day to go with him. We went on a number of trips, Naz and I, and it was great fun. The events of this story occurred as we were approaching an area which Naz told me, before we even set off, is surrounded by lots of superstition and ghost stories. Naturally, given my love for such things, I was really keen to go there. Naz told me that locals believe one of the mountains contains the ruins of an ancient ziggurat of the kind that can be found all over Peru. They claim this vast pyramid was home to a race of ancient gods who, even today, came and went in their chariots of the sky, flying into secret doors in the side of the mountain in gleaming silver ships. I was less interested in these stories than in those surrounding the El Chupacabra, a name I'm sure you've heard before and a creature who really requires no introduction. The Chupacabra was supposed to be highly active in the area we were heading to and had been sighted both at night and by day. It was blamed for numerous livestock deaths in the mountains, and, Naz told me, locals were absolutely terrified of it. I'd always thought of the legend of Chupacabra as a fascinating but probably fictional story, paranormal in origin and therefore of great interest to me. But the people of the place where we were heading were living in genuine fear of the thing, and that made me sit up and take notice. I was excited on the day of the trip, but didn't honestly expect to see anything. Naz told me he had camped in that area before now and seen inexplicable lights in the sky, and so my interest was definitely piqued, and I was hopeful I would see something, but I never imagined for a second we would see anything near as mind-blowing as we did. I think, in fact, that this is my favorite brush with the paranormal precisely because it was not one I had deliberately sought out or been asked to investigate. It was purely chance. Anyone could have seen what Naz and I saw that day, but it just so happened to be me. And for that I have always been infinitely grateful. To who, I don't know. I'm just grateful. We were driving along a mountain road, the radio blasting out our favorite music, and our windows down. The mountain, as identified as being the fabled ziggurat under the hills, was visible on the horizon. I had to admit, it did look unnaturally triangular, with terraced edges that were similar to the ziggurat ruins I'd already visited in Peru with Naz, in my capacity as a wide-eyed tourist. I would have loved to investigate more closely, and Naz promised that we would, at some point during our trip there. We were approaching a sharp bend in the narrow road, close now to the village/town, which Naz had told me was being terrorized by El Chupacabra, when Naz suddenly became excited and started pointing into the sky above the mountaintops, jabbing his finger and bouncing in his seat. He was driving, so this was somewhat disconcerting. I followed his pointing finger and saw something silvery in the sky. Quick as a flash, I took out my camera and snapped off a picture. It was moving at incredible speed, and I was using a shittier camera than you can get these days. No smartphones back then. Nevertheless, I managed to get a good picture. The strange object coming in fast over the mountains. It zigzagged wildly through the sky above the mountain, then suddenly zipped forward so that it became much larger, and I realized this was because it had come closer. It stopped dead, hovering above the nearest mountaintop, and Naz stopped the car so we could watch and I could take more pictures. The UFO as it moves closer. The UFO at a dead stop. In the above picture, the UFO is hovering above the closest mountain to us. It was silvery, like chrome, and spinning rapidly in a clockwise direction relative to us, reflecting the mountain beneath in its underside as perfectly as if it was a mirror. Slowly the orb started to descend, landing in the dense undergrowth and brush on the top of the mountain. At an estimate, I'd say it was a good 20 to 25 feet wide and top to bottom. Suddenly the radio died and the engine cut out. Naz turned the ignition and restarted the engine, but it died immediately. Both of us felt a strange, buzzing sensation. The atmosphere in the car was electrified, and whatever surface you touched, you could feel a fur of static, like you can feel on the surface of a TV when it's been on a while. With this strange feeling came a sense of something intrusive and not altogether friendly. It was nothing empirical, but it was there, and it was a horrible feeling. Naz started to panic and restarted the engine, but again it died. I tried to get him to calm down, but he wouldn't and was now pumping the accelerator while turning the ignition. I was terrified he'd flood the engine and we'd be stranded, but then the engine roared and Naz floored it before the starter motor could fail again. We were back on the road and my eyes were back on the UFO, now nestling on the top of the mountain. Now that the strange feeling, the static, and that weird sense of being examined had passed, I realized how much of an opportunity one was wasting and got my camera ready again. Slow down, Naz. I begged, but he was really spooked and wanted to get to the town. Something about his nerve jangled my own, but I also wanted to get some pictures. I snapped one off, but my hand was shaking so much it came out as a blurry mess. Nothing to see. Then Naz started to slow the car. Shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. What is it? I asked, and Naz pointed through the windscreen, reducing speed drastically. There was some kind of levee up ahead and a broken down old building. The kind of thing you see by the road from time to time and wonder what purpose it serves. But the building wasn't what had caught Naz's attention, nor was it the first thing I noticed. There was something there next to the building. A creature, pale in color and something like a cross between a squat kangaroo and some kind of miniature dinosaur. It was standing next to the end of the building and peering in over the windowsill of a window. I took a picture, even as Naz was slowing the car almost to a stop. It's a good picture, and I've sharpened it in the hope of revealing a bit more detail. Note the UFO now nestled on the mountaintop is also visible in the picture. I've circled it in red. Suddenly, the radio came back on. We'd been blasting out music, so it came on loud and startled us out of our skin. The creature turned its head sharply to look our way and saw us for the first time. Its eyes met mine, and I can honestly say that if I have ever been in any danger of soiling myself involuntarily, This was the moment I came closest. Naz screamed and slammed his foot on the accelerator again. We burned rubber, and I fumbled to get my camera. "There's another on the roof," Naz exclaimed, and as we raced past the building I saw it and snapped off a picture. The thing on the roof, first picture. Both the creatures watched us with a kind of detached fascination as we roared past, our music blaring. The creature I have since decided was closest in appearance to the Chupacabra was classic in every sense. It had that kangaroo, upright appearance with a face and head similar to a small pony, or maybe a dog, a bull terrier. But it wasn't a dog. Its hind legs were long and muscular while its forelimbs were ridiculously short, like a T-Rex. The back of its skull flared outward into a hood, like a cobra, and its eyes were malevolent. The thing on the roof, by comparison, matched pretty much every description I've ever heard of an alien gray. It had a large ovoid head with huge eyes and a tiny mouth. I saw no nose or ears. Its body was spindly, and the whole thing was pale in color. As we drove away from the scene, Naz was not about to stop. I leaned back and took a parting shot of the thing on the roof. It was leaping up on its hind legs and flinging its arms around. In my head, I could hear a strange kind of bleeding sound and the buzzing, static feeling surrounding my camera, but I held on and took that last picture. Final picture of the thing on the roof gesticulating and doing a crazy dance as we rushed away in Naz's car. When we got to the town, Naz was in shock. His lips were white and he was trembling so badly the locals took him to the local tavern and gave him sour pisco, Peru's national drink, until the color started returning to his face. They knew exactly what we had seen when I described it. The gods from the mountain had blessed us with their presence. We canceled our trip into the mountains, and I don't think Naz was ever quite the same again afterwards. We took a different route home, and after that I don't remember Naz going on any other excursions, at least not into that part of Peru. For my own part, one couldn't wait to get the pictures developed and have never forgotten the experience. The pictures occupy pride of place in my photo album of the bizarre, and the paranormal in the story is one I never tire of retelling. More from me. Sixth story. The goddamn Chupacabra. I drove through the small New Mexico town looking for my hotel. It wasn't my first choice, but the two places I preferred were booked. The one I'd settled on had decent enough reviews, but it was a little off the beaten path. I ended up driving through a rundown neighborhood. Old houses held together with plywood and tarps. I only mention this because above the frame of every door was a symbol I didn't recognize. It looked kind of like a barb knot, if that makes any sense. The marks were all the same color, a kind of pale green, and they all looked freshly painted. I pulled into the hotel and couldn't help asking about it at the front desk. The lady waved a hand at me dismissively and told me it was just some local custom from way back. I shrugged back and headed up to my room. The next morning I drove into the desert for work. I pulled off onto a smaller trail and drove over a cattle guard. About a half-mile later, I passed a dead cow on the side of the road. I didn't think much of it, especially after having to stop for the herd as they lazily crossed the road. I found a gap between two smaller calves and drove through. A truck behind me wasn't as delicate. He drove directly at the larger cows and revved his engine. They took the hint and moved out of the road. Being a city boy, I never would have thought to do that. I was told to keep an eye out for wildlife at the site, but I could see for miles in every direction and there wasn't anything moving out there. It was hotter than hell, but eventually the sun began to set, and after a 15-hour shift, I started the long drive back to the main road in the dark. And by dark, I mean full cloud cover, no stars, no moon, pitch black dark. As I drove, I could see large black forms on either side of the road. It was unnerving, but I quickly realized they were the cows I'd passed on the way in. There seemed to be a lot more of them, and I wasn't expecting them to be grazing by the road at night. But here we are. I set the cruise control to 55, deciding speeding down this dark dirt road at night with a bunch of black cows wandering around wasn't the best call. I had a couple of cows leaning over the side of the road, but none actually in it. Suddenly a form emerged in front of the car, and I slammed on my brakes. My mind was racing. Admittedly, I was still a little shaken by the ominous black forms floating just outside of the light on either side of my car. Even though I'd figured out they were just cows, part of my brain was still on high alert. My pulse also hadn't slowed since I'd first seen them, probably mostly due to the stress of trying to keep an eye out for car-destroying cows that might as well be invisible at night. I need you to keep that context in mind. The thing in front of me was like nothing my mind could remember seeing before. A completely alien form. My mouth hung open as I stared at it, mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. It was moving back and forth erratically, in small, jittery motions. Suddenly, I realized what I was looking at. It was a cow's ass. I sighed deeply and laughed at myself as I tried to calm down. To be fair, it was a huge cow. I'd never seen one that tall before. It had to have been 9 feet tall. My brow furrowed as I tried to figure out if cows actually got that big. My eyes scanned back over the beast, and I realized its legs looked weird. The knees were closer to the torso than you'd expect for a cow that tall. The bottom pats of the legs had to be super long. I leaned forward to check them out, and my blood ran cold. Its back hooves were dangling 2 feet off the ground. I looked back up, and the body of the cow started to lower. 2 things became obvious. First, the front half of the cow was missing. Second, something very tall was looking me directly in my eyeballs. I could only see its eyes as they flashed that predatory glint. My brain short-circuited, and I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. Next thing I knew, it was on my hood. Its claws dug into the metal, and it howled. All I could see were 2 fangs backed by row after row of jagged teeth, and those damn eyes. I pounded the brakes, and its face smashed into the windshield, spider-webbing it. It shook its head as I shifted back into drive and put the pedal through the floorboard. I veered left around the back half of the cow, had been working on, and the thing slid off the right side of the hood. I heard it crunch in the ground, and I quickly got up to a much faster speed than I was comfortable with on that squirrely road. I looked in the rear view, but everything that wasn't right in front of the car was blackness. My eyes kept shifting from the far, too small section of the road. I could actually see to the deep gouges in my hood. Needless to say, my heart would not chill out. It felt like someone was trying to punch their way out of my chest. Then I heard a howl. It was somewhere behind me, but it was impossible to tell where or how far away it was. Its howl rang out again, this time much closer. I was going 75 miles per hour down a sketchy road, and this thing was catching up. Suddenly, something slammed into the back door on my side, shattering the window. The car started to lose traction, and the back end started to swing wildly. I somehow managed to regain control, and as the back end slid back to the left, I guessed the tire caught its foot, and I felt the car jump as it went under. There was an awful crunching noise, followed by about a half a second of howling as its head was pulled away from the window, and then a very damp thud, then silence. I finally saw all the reflectors around the stop sign at the main road. I came to a stop and looked both ways, and then a thought hit me. What the fuck are you doing? As my foot shifted off the brake, the howl rang out again. It was above me. It slammed down onto the roof of the car, caving it in completely across the back seats and blowing out the rest of the windows. I floored it and cut the wheel left onto the main road. I heard its claws raking across the roof as it howled, trying to hold on. It slid off the right side of the car and continued to howl. I got up to 65 and heard it gaining on me quickly. 75, and it was still catching up. At 85, I seemed to be outpacing it. I settled into 90 miles per hour and started to hear the howls sink back. I got about 5 minutes down the road before the howls were too quiet to hear over the wind rushing in the windows. I came over a small rise and saw a cop car's lights flash quickly. It was nice to be given a warning, but I wasn't about to slow down. I blew by him and eventually saw his lights flare back up behind me. It was probably fine. Surely he'd see the damage to my car and understand why I was nearing 100 miles per hour on his road, right? I still didn't feel safe slowing down, though. I watched his lights bounce onto the road and start to accelerate. I was still pulling away, and I got in a pretty good lead. I was starting to think maybe I'd just outpace him when I saw his lights starts to wobble strangely. They jerked to the side, then seemed to tumble and go out. It dawned on me that his car had probably flipped over. I pulled over and stuck my head out the window, starting into the inky blackness behind me, trying to catch any sight or sound from the cop car. There was a really brief, dim flash, followed shortly by a dull popping sound. This repeated a few times, then there was nothing. I got a real bad feeling and continued on my way. I pulled into the hotel about an hour later. I parked below my window so I could watch the car, but I stared down at it for an hour or so and nothing showed up. I tried to look up anything I could find about what had attacked me, but the closest thing I could find was some old articles about the Chupacabra. Apparently the locals here used to worship it, but that thing is supposed to be smaller, about a quarter the size of the thing I came across. I'm at my wit's end here. I wasn't able to sleep, and I don't feel safe going back out to the site. What did I see last night? Thank a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.